Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Dear students and viewers, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you all are well and fine by the sure mercy of Almighty Allah. Stay home, stay safe during this COVID-19 pandemic. We are discussing online classes of class 11th history. Today we are going to an important topic: slave trade in Europe. Slave trade is like a blot on the face of modern world history. In the 16th century, the slave trade spread to the South and North America. What was the slave trade basically? The 17th and the 18th century witnessed unprecedented increase in the demand of slaves in the New World. There was great demand of cheap labor for clearing forests, working in agriculture sector and in gold mines. After the discovery of gold in 1700 CE, so the Europeans started slave trade with Africa. These merchants used to convey their demands to the local leaders in Africa. They used to have a small contingent of army under their control. With the help of these soldiers, they used to conduct raids in the interiors of Africa during the nights and enslave the people forcibly. The slaves were predominantly young men. Their average age group was between 13 to 30 years. The number of women slaves were 30 to 35%. The strength of children was quite meager. These slaves were sold to the European traders. The European traders used to take these African slaves in the New World in the ships. These ships used to these ships these slaves were tied in these ships with chains so they could not flee. They were given insufficient food materials. It used to take 4 to 6 weeks to reach the New World from Africa. In the course of this journey, the slaves had to face many problems. Many of them died on the way. Some committed suicide. On reaching the port, the slaves were sold by these traders to the needy people on double or triple profit. On the other hand, if we look into the life of the slaves, most of the slaves served as agricultural laborers. Some of the slaves also served in mines. They had to work in terribly awful condition. The slaves were made to work for 14 to 16 hours a day. Even during their working hours, they were kept tied in chains in order to ensure that none of them could flee. In case a slave used to work slackly, the white observers used to lash him very brutally. Several other sorts of inhuman activities were also inflicted on him. Despite all these excesses, neither a case could be initiated nor any punishment was given to any white man, irrespective of the fact that the slave was used to toil very hard. They could hardly ever had a decent meal. In short, the slaves lived a life far inferior than bare animal existence. A great historian, Eric Williams, was the first historian who graphically elaborated the plight of slaves in his book Capitalism and Slavery, published in the 1940s. What was the condition of the slaves in Europe? They cannot express their writers. After that, we go to ahead another important point, that is the restrictions on slaves. What were the restrictions on slaves? Several kinds of restrictions were imposed on the slaves. They were not allowed to leave their workstation without the authority of his master. They were not allowed to use any kind of intoxicants. They were also not allowed to wear armor. They did not even enjoy the right to education. They could not register case against the white people even in case of murder or rape. And they could not embrace Christianity. In case of violation of any of these norms, the concerned slave was severely punished. This was a condition. This was the restrictions on the slaves in Europe, in the slave trade. Move ahead. The impact of slave trade. What was the impact of the slave trade? Slave trade has several far-reaching consequences. Firstly, the system provides distract for Africa in particular. The slave trade started in the 15th century on quite small scale. It reached its heights during the 17th and the 18th century. As a result of this system, about two-thirds of African men were sold in the European markets as slaves. It caused distortion of sex ratio and thus gender inequilibrium in Africa. Secondly, the slaves had to bear harsh atrocities due to the system. Their life became worse than animals. Thirdly, the slave trade proved very profitable for the Europeans. The slaves were employed to work in the mines and fields. Their untrained efforts gave altogether new directions to the European economy. After that, final point is the abolition of slavery. How the slavery abolished? Who abolished this slavery? On account of the inhuman treatment of slaves, voices were raised against this cruel system across several countries. Several leaders inspired their respective governments to impose and ban on the system. They had to wage a long battle for the purpose. Finally, their efforts bore fruits. As a result, Denmark has to its credit was the first country, Denmark, in the world. The States of being the first country to ban slave trade in 1803 CE. Denmark becomes the first country in the world to ban on slave trade in 1803 CE. Undoubtedly, it was the first significant step towards the abolition of slavery. Britain was the first country to abolish slavery in 1833. Thereafter, France abolished it in 1818 C. United States of America 1865 C. Cuba 1886 C. Brazil in 1888 C. The abolition of slavery undoubtedly was a signal for the beginning of new era. I hope you all now will be able to learn something about the slavery trade in Europe. What was the condition of the slaves? What was the restrictions of the slaves? What was the impact of slave trade? How the abolition of slavery came into existence? Who was the first country which banned on slavery? Denmark was the first country. After that, Britain. After that, France. Then United States of America. Then Brazil. Then Cuba. Cuba in 1886. Then Brazil 1880. All these countries banned. This was a signal for the beginning of new era in the human history. I hope you are now aware about the slave trade. Thank you. Have a nice day. Inshallah, in the next class we will discuss a new topic of your NCRT history class 11th. तब तक के लिए फी अमान अल्लाह.